Full story. Cooking dinner for family. Mom's harsh words. Hurt me deeply. Welcome to Silent Wars. Today, we share the full story of Lena, her journey from being taken for granted to finding true freedom and self-love. If you want to be inspired and learn how to set healthy boundaries, stay tuned. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Silent Wars for more powerful stories. Lena was the kind of woman who quietly carried the weight of her family's expectations without ever complaining. For years, she devoted countless hours to preparing meals that catered to every single dietary preference and restriction in her extended family. Whether it was a gluten-free lasagna for her Aunt Carla, a vegan salad for her cousin's girlfriend, or the roast chicken her father still pretended to love, she took meticulous care to make sure everyone felt seen and cared for through the food she prepared. It wasn't just cooking. It was an act of love and dedication. She planned every detail from grocery shopping and meal prepping to cleaning the kitchen afterward and setting the table just right. Her sense of responsibility extended beyond the kitchen. She was the organizer, the problem solver, the one who made sure the house was spotless and welcoming for family gatherings. To her, it was second nature, a role she had embraced since childhood. Yet, despite her relentless effort, the gratitude she hoped for was often absent. Lena's family seemed to take her for granted, assuming she would always be there, quietly managing the background work that made celebrations possible. The subtle, dismissive remarks and lack of acknowledgement chipped away at her quietly. But still, Lena showed up, because that was what she knew to do, be the dependable daughter, sister, and aunt who made life easier for everyone else. Her love was expressed through action, not words, and she had grown accustomed to that silent exchange. Every gathering was an opportunity to demonstrate her care, and every meal was a chance to show her devotion. She measured her worth in the smiles she hoped to inspire and the comfort she provided. Yet behind the scenes, a quiet exhaustion took root, the kind that only those who give endlessly without replenishing themselves understand. Lena was more than just the caretaker. She was the glue holding her family's traditions together. But even the strongest bonds fray when one person bears the entire strain alone. For years, she balanced the needs of 12 different people, their preferences, and unspoken demands with a grace that few noticed. This chapter of her life, filled with quiet sacrifice and unacknowledged labor, defined who she was until the moment she realized that love should not be measured by how much you give, but by how much you are valued in return. Despite all the hours Lena poured into preparing the perfect meal and making sure everything was just right, the appreciation she longed for never truly came. The moment she proudly set the platters on the table, ready to share the fruits of her labor, the room's atmosphere shifted. Her mother's reaction was sharp and unmistakable. A wrinkled nose and a dismissive comment loud enough for everyone to hear. "We should have just ordered takeout," she said, as if the countless hours Lena spent cooking were meaningless. Her father simply chuckled, offering no defense or support, his laughter only adding to the sting of the criticism. What hurt the most wasn't just the words, but the silence from the rest of the family. Not a single person stood up for Lena, not one voice rose in her defense or offered a word of thanks for all she had done. It was as if her efforts were invisible, unworthy of acknowledgement. The sting of being overlooked and unappreciated cut deep, making her feel less like a daughter or sister and more like a background fixture expected to work tirelessly without recognition. The dismissive attitude wasn't new to Lena. It had been a recurring pattern throughout her life, but each time it happened, the disappointment grew heavier, and the walls she had built to protect her pride felt increasingly fragile. She carried the invisible burden of holding the family together, yet was met with indifference or subtle disdain. Even when she poured her heart into these moments, hoping for a small sign of gratitude, the family's reaction left her feeling unseen and unheard. This lack of support was isolating, turning what should have been a warm family gathering into a moment of quiet heartbreak. Lena learned early on that her value to the family was measured not in love or appreciation, but in the work she could do for them. Her mother's harsh words and her father's indifferent laughter were reminders that her sacrifices were taken for granted, expected rather than cherished. It was a painful lesson in invisibility and neglect, one that chipped away at her spirit while she continued to give everything she had, hoping that one day, maybe, her family would truly see her. For years, Lena had been the invisible force holding her family's chaos together, the organizer, the planner, the one everyone relied on but rarely thanked. But after one particularly painful dinner, she reached a breaking point. The weight of being the family's caretaker without any real appreciation finally became unbearable. That night, for the first time, Lena decided she would no longer play the role that had been quietly assigned to her. She stood up, untied her apron, and calmly announced that she was done. No more silent labor, no more invisible efforts to keep everyone else comfortable while she was overlooked. It wasn't a dramatic outburst, but a clear and firm boundary, one she had never set before. The decision wasn't easy. Lena had spent so many years internalizing the idea that her value came from how well she managed the needs of others. She was the go-to person for every family gathering, the glue that kept traditions alive, and the safety net that caught every slip. Yet, beneath her composed exterior, exhaustion and resentment had been building for years. Now, she was reclaiming her time and energy for herself. She canceled the Airbnb she had booked for Christmas, the ski resort reservations for New Year's, and the summer rental she'd carefully planned months in advance. She deleted group messages, withdrew from the family chats, and erased every itinerary she had prepared. No explanations were given. She simply removed herself from the roles that had once defined her. This act of self-preservation was revolutionary for Lena. For so long, she had been the dependable daughter, the organizer, the caretaker, always putting everyone else's needs first. But now, she was choosing to put herself first, something she hadn't allowed herself before. The quiet freedom she felt was intoxicating. Without the burden of managing everyone else's expectations, Lena found space to breathe, reflect, and rediscover who she was beyond her family's demands. This wasn't about anger or revenge, it was about survival and self-respect. She was done being the family's invisible helper and was ready to live for herself. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where Lena embraced her worth beyond service and found peace in setting boundaries that honored her own needs. Lena had always been the family's unofficial coordinator, the one who quietly managed every detail of family events, from childhood birthday parties to milestone celebrations and holiday gatherings. From a young age, she stepped up naturally, setting the table with precision, organizing schedules, and smoothing over any disagreements before they escalated. Her family depended on her without hesitation, entrusting her with everything from sending invitations to managing vendors and handling last-minute crises. Over time, this role became so ingrained in Lena's life that she barely noticed how much she carried on her shoulders. She gave without complaint, believing it was simply what family members expected and what she was meant to do. But the cost of that constant effort was a growing invisibility. Despite her tireless work and impeccable attention to detail, Lena was rarely thanked or even acknowledged. Instead, her contributions were seen as the norm, something that just happened, like clockwork, without effort. It was as if her family viewed her dedication as an obligation rather than a gift. No one stopped to consider the emotional and physical toll it took on her, nor the sacrifice of her own time and energy. The family's reliance on her was so deep-rooted that they never thought to ask if she needed help or if she felt overwhelmed. Gratitude was scarce, and recognition was even rarer. When things went smoothly, it was expected. When problems arose, Lena was often blamed or pressured to fix them quietly. This pattern reinforced a painful dynamic where Lena's value was tied exclusively to what she could do for others, not who she was as a person. She became the backbone of every family function, but without the support or appreciation she deserved. The emotional labor she performed managing relationships, calming tensions, and keeping everyone on track was invisible work that drained her over time. Despite this, Lena persisted, driven by love, duty, and a desire to keep her family together. But deep down, she knew the role she played was unsustainable. The relentless cycle of giving without receiving acknowledgement left her exhausted and isolated. It was only when the weight of these unbalanced expectations became unbearable that Lena realized she needed to reclaim her life and redefine her worth beyond endless service. This awareness marked the beginning of a profound shift in how she saw herself and her relationship with her family. After years of carrying the invisible burden of managing everyone else's expectations, Lena finally made the decision to step back and release herself from the overwhelming responsibilities she had taken on. The moment she let go, she experienced a profound sense of freedom, one that she hadn't felt in a very long time. No longer was she shackled by the endless to-do lists, the constant pressure to organize every event perfectly, or the silent expectation that she would always be the one to make things run smoothly. Instead, she discovered a quiet peace that came from reclaiming her time and energy for herself. This newfound freedom wasn't about rebellion or anger. It was about self-preservation and healing. Lena began to prioritize her own well-being, something she had neglected for far too long. Without the weight of others' demands pressing down on her, she could breathe deeply and focus on what truly mattered: her health, her happiness, and her sense of identity beyond the caretaker role. Mornings no longer started with a checklist of tasks for others, but with moments of calm reflection, a cup of coffee savored in silence, and plans made solely for her own joy. She allowed herself to take breaks without guilt, to say no when needed, and to explore activities that nourished her soul. This shift wasn't instantaneous or easy, but with each small step, Lena felt lighter and more whole. The absence of constant pressure opened space for creativity, self-discovery, and genuine connection, not just with others, but with herself. It was a healing journey, one where she learned to value her own needs as much as those she once prioritized for her family. The peace Lena found in stepping away from her excessive responsibilities was a reminder that true strength comes from setting boundaries and honoring one's limits. She realized that caring for herself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. This transformation allowed her to build a life that was balanced and fulfilling, where she could still love and support her family without losing sight of her own happiness. In this freedom, Lena finally understood that she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders to be valued or loved. And that realization was the greatest gift she could give herself. When Lena decided to step away and stop carrying the weight of her family's needs, the ripple effect was immediate and undeniable. For years, her family had come to rely on her as the backbone of every gathering, the organizer behind every plan, and the quiet fixer of every problem. But once Lena pulled back, the cracks in their carefully managed routine began to show. At first, there was confusion: texts and calls went unanswered, plans fell apart, and a sense of disarray settled over family events. It wasn't until the cancellations started piling up that panic set in. Family members realized just how much they had depended on Lena's tireless efforts, and that no one else had stepped up to fill the void. The holidays, once smoothly orchestrated, suddenly became a chaotic scramble. The carefully coordinated schedules, the meal planning, and the myriad small tasks that Lena had managed behind the scenes were now glaringly absent. Without her quiet presence keeping everything in check, tensions flared, and disagreements that had previously been smoothed over bubbled to the surface. But what was most striking was the family's collective failure to share responsibility. Despite the growing chaos, no one took the initiative to take on the role Lena had long filled. Instead, they found themselves scrambling, overwhelmed by tasks they had never needed to manage before. The realization dawned slowly but painfully. Lena had been holding the family together in ways no one had fully appreciated. Some family members reached out, expressing guilt and surprise at how much she had done for them without complaint. Others tried to negotiate or plead for her return to her old role, not quite ready to let go of the convenience her presence had provided. But for Lena, this was a necessary awakening for the whole family. It wasn't about punishment or revenge, it was about breaking a cycle of dependency that had gone unchallenged for far too long. Her absence forced her family to confront their own roles and responsibilities, and to recognize that a healthy family requires shared effort, not the burden falling on one person alone. Though the transition was uncomfortable and difficult for everyone involved, it opened the door for growth, accountability, and a chance for the family to redefine how they function together, hopefully, this time with more balance and mutual respect. After years of feeling invisible and undervalued despite her endless efforts, Lena made a conscious choice to distance herself from the family dynamics that had defined her life for so long. It was a decision that didn't come lightly, but it was necessary for her own mental and emotional well-being. She began by cutting off the constant stream of communication that had tied her to the family's demands. Group chats that once buzzed with last-minute plans and requests for help went unanswered. And eventually, she removed herself from them altogether. Invitations, events, and shared calendars that had once dictated her schedule were erased without a second thought. Lena deleted the Airbnb bookings, canceled reservations, and quietly withdrew from the family's collective plans she had once meticulously arranged. This wasn't an act of spite or anger, it was a deliberate step towards reclaiming her life and creating boundaries that allowed her to breathe freely. Freed from the endless notifications and the weight of responsibility, Lena began to carve out space for herself, a space filled with quiet moments and personal freedom. She embraced the stillness that came with not having to manage everyone else's expectations or fix every problem. This newfound solitude wasn't loneliness, but a much-needed sanctuary where she could reconnect with who she truly was outside of the caretaker role. Lena found comfort in routines that centered on her own happiness, like leisurely mornings with a cup of coffee and no pressing agenda, or evenings spent reading by the fireplace without interruptions. She didn't feel the need to explain or justify her absence. Her silence was its own statement. Lena understood that she owed no one an apology for choosing to prioritize her own peace over the chaos she'd long endured. As days turned into weeks, she felt lighter, unburdened by the emotional labor that had weighed her down for so long. The freedom to live on her own terms was transformative. Lena was rediscovering passions and hobbies she had shelved away and building a life that honored her needs and boundaries. The family may have noticed her absence, but Lena no longer saw herself as missing from their lives. She was finally present in her own. This separation was not about burning bridges. It was about building a healthier foundation where respect, self-care, and mutual support could someday thrive. Until then, Lena was content to live her life quietly, fully embracing the peace and freedom that came from stepping away. In the months following her decision to step back, Lena began receiving messages from a few family members who finally seemed to recognize the heavy burden she had carried for so long. These were not grand gestures or public declarations, but quiet, heartfelt apologies sent through texts or private conversations. Some admitted they hadn't realized just how much Lena had done to keep the family running smoothly and how much strain she had been under. They expressed regret for taking her efforts for granted and for expecting her to always be the one to pick up the pieces. However, while these apologies held a sincerity that touched Lena, she found herself in a different place emotionally. She wasn't looking for forgiveness or validation anymore, nor was she interested in trying to mend relationships that had long been one-sided. Lena had spent years trying to fix what was broken, often at the expense of her own well-being, and now she was choosing a path of release rather than repair. She understood that healing wasn't about forcing reconciliation or seeking approval from others. It was about finding peace within herself. So, instead of responding with explanations or reopening old wounds, Lena accepted these acknowledgments quietly and kept her distance. Her focus shifted inward toward building a life that was rooted in self-respect, balance, and personal fulfillment. Letting go became her act of empowerment. She realized that carrying resentment or clinging to the hope of changed dynamics would only weigh her down further. The love she once gave unconditionally had to be tempered with boundaries that protected her heart and mind. Lena's choice to prioritize her own needs didn't mean she harbored bitterness. Rather, it was a declaration of her worth and a commitment to herself. This new chapter was about embracing freedom from obligation and cultivating a sense of self that was independent of others' recognition. While some family members still struggled to understand her distance, Lena was no longer defined by their expectations. Instead, she was defined by her courage to say no, her strength to walk away, and her wisdom to nurture her own happiness. The apologies, though late, were a testament to the impact she had made, but Lena's true healing came not from their words, but from her own decision to live fully, authentically, and on her own terms. After stepping away from the relentless demands of her family, Lena began a new chapter focused on healing and self-growth. For the first time in years, she dedicated time to herself not out of selfishness, but out of necessity. Recognizing that her mental and emotional health needed nurturing, Lena sought out activities that brought her genuine joy and peace. She joined a local hiking group where she found companionship among women of all ages who shared little beyond their love of nature and the simple pleasure of walking through quiet trails. These weekly hikes became a sanctuary, a space free from the pressures of family expectations and endless responsibilities. Here, Lena could breathe deeply, listen to birdsong, and simply be present. She also began therapy, not because she felt broken, but because she wanted to understand and support herself better. Through counseling, Lena unpacked years of unspoken emotions, the exhaustion, the resentment, and the quiet loneliness that had accompanied her role as the family's caretaker. Therapy helped her build tools for setting boundaries and nurturing self-compassion, allowing her to break old patterns and embrace healthier ways of relating to others and to herself. Beyond mental health, Lena started prioritizing her physical well-being. She incorporated gentle yoga sessions and mindfulness meditation into her routine, practices that grounded her and helped alleviate the stress that had built up over decades. Cooking for herself became an act of love, a way to nourish not only her body but also her spirit. She explored new recipes that excited her palate rather than catering to anyone else's preferences, savoring the freedom to create meals simply because she enjoyed them. As Lena invested in these new pursuits, she noticed a profound shift within. The joy she rediscovered in small, everyday moments, the warmth of sunlight through her kitchen window, the calm of a quiet evening with a book fueled her resilience and deepened her sense of self-worth. This period of healing wasn't marked by dramatic transformations but by steady, gentle growth. Lena was learning that caring for herself was not a luxury but a vital part of living fully. She embraced her imperfections, celebrated her progress, and allowed herself the grace to move forward at her own pace. Through this journey, Lena found not only peace, but also a renewed passion for life, grounded in the simple truth that self-love is the foundation for all other love. In the quiet aftermath of all the challenges and revelations, Lena came to a profound understanding, one that changed the way she viewed herself and her relationships forever. She realized there was a crucial difference between being needed and being truly valued. For so long, Lena had equated her worth with how much others depended on her, how tirelessly she served their needs, and how often she stepped in to fix problems. But being constantly needed didn't mean she was appreciated. It didn't mean she was loved or respected for who she was as a person. It simply meant she was filling a role, one that others found convenient, but never fully honored. This realization was liberating. Lena understood that being needed can sometimes be a trap, a cycle where one gives endlessly without receiving recognition or genuine care in return. It was a role that drained her spirit and blurred the boundaries between self-sacrifice and self-neglect. What she longed for and what she was finally ready to claim was to be valued, to be seen, respected, and loved for her true self, not just for what she could do for others. This clarity gave her the courage to redefine her life on her own terms. Lena chose to step away from the exhausting expectations and the unbalanced dynamics that had kept her tethered for years. Instead, she embraced a life marked by peace, freedom, and meaning, one where she was the author of her own story. She created space for her own needs, dreams, and happiness. Lena found joy in the simple pleasures of life: quiet mornings, deep connections with supportive friends, and the freedom to pursue passions that nurtured her soul. This new path was not about isolation, but about balance and self-respect. It was about living authentically, without the constant pressure to please or perform. In choosing peace over chaos, freedom over obligation, and meaning over mere function, Lena discovered a deeper kind of love, the love she gave to herself. It was a love that healed old wounds, rebuilt confidence, and allowed her to flourish. Lena's journey wasn't just about walking away from what no longer served her. It was about walking toward a life where she felt whole and honored. She came to understand that absence isn't always loss. Sometimes it's liberation. By choosing to live for herself, Lena found the greatest gift of all: the freedom to be truly happy, truly free, and truly at peace. Life often places invisible responsibilities and expectations on our shoulders, which we may silently accept. From Lena's story, we learn that love and self-worth are not measured by how much we serve or please others, but by our ability to care for and honor ourselves. For seniors, setting boundaries and saying no to excessive burdens is not selfish. It is necessary to protect mental and physical health. When we learn to let go of responsibilities that do not belong to us, we find true peace and freedom, things far more valuable than any achievement in life. Moreover, taking care of ourselves, finding joy in simple things, and spending time on activities we love help us live healthier, happier, and more meaningful days. The most important lesson is, at any stage of life, we have the right to love, care for, and prioritize ourselves. Allow yourself to rest, live authentically, and know that your value does not depend on what you do for others, but lies within your soul and inner peace. This is the greatest gift you can give yourself and your loved ones. Thank you for watching the full story on Silent Wars. If you found this video meaningful, please hit like and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. See you in the next video.